What is the correlation between postpartum depression and socioeconomic status?
By Alexandra Dumas and Carlin Newhouse.
Introduction and literature review. What causes postpartum depression and how does it affect new mothers? Postpartum depression is a mental health illness that affects women after childbirth. Postpartum depression is different from baby blues, which causes mood swings and exhaustion for a few hours to a few days, and is completely normal. Postpartum depression, however, cannot be diagnosed until 4 weeks after giving birth. It causes feelings of sadness, loneliness, anxiety, and restlessness that can last longer than a few weeks. This condition affects an average of 13% of mothers in the Western countries. It is important for new mothers and those who love them to understand the symptoms of postpartum depression and how to reach out to family, friends, and medical professionals for help. The purpose of the study is to build on previous research by studying the correlation between socioeconomic status and recovery rates from postpartum depression. Correlations between socioeconomic status and general health that we found in our literature review is that income is strongly associated with morbidity and mortality across income distribution. Economic inequalities linked to disparities in life expectancy across income distribution. We see that low-income women and mothers in the U.S. are more likely to experience postpartum depression than their counterparts of lower income. A study in the Journal of Women's Health showed that groups with higher income had significantly lower odds of experiencing postpartum depression than women that did not.
Literature review continued. Here we have listed the symptoms of postpartum depression. Some include feelings of sadness, crying, restlessness, loss of interest, loss of appetite, low energy, difficulty sleeping, weight fluctuation, feeling suicidal, showing little interest in the baby, and feeling worthless, hopeless, or guilty.
A previous study conducted in Qatar included a sample size of approximately 1,300 women that had given birth in the last 6 months. The sample studied different variables including family support, income, age, educational level, and relationship status that could have impacts on the postpartum depression. It was found in the study that approximately 17.6% of the women in the sample were experiencing postpartum depression. In conclusion, the prevalence of postpartum depression in women living in Qatar had similar results as developing countries. The study found that main risk factors that can contribute to postpartum depression include financial difficulties, prematurity, lack of family support, and poor relationships.
In our review of previous studies, we learned that mothers suffering from postpartum depression have a decreased range of emotion and a lower activity level. In chronic cases, postpartum depression can last more than a year. Our research question states, what is the correlation between socioeconomic status and recovery rates from postpartum depression in new mothers?
There are 2 variables in our study. First, the independent variable of socioeconomic status, and our dependent variable being measured, the rate of recovery in new mothers experiencing postpartum depression.
Our hypothesis states higher socioeconomic status will be correlated to faster rates of recovery in new mothers with postpartum depression.
Our research design is a longitudinal quantitative study. We will be utilizing the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale to measure postpartum depression. It is measured on a Likert scale.
Participants. Our population will be new mothers under the age of 40 in the DC area. We will present an open call for participants in various hospitals across the region. From those that respond to the call, we'll randomly select 200 individuals for our sample. The sample will then be broken into 2 groups, our experimental and control groups. Participants will be randomly assigned to the respective groups, and at the beginning of the study, participants will virtually complete consent forms.
We will be having 2 groups, our experimental and control group. In our experimental group, it will be broken into 2 subcategories. 50 of those being mothers living in households with an annual income less than $40,000 a year. And the second group, consisting of 50 mothers living in households with an annual income more than $40,000 a year. The control group, while not being tested, will also be broken into two subsets: 50 mothers living in households with an annual income less than $40,000 a year, and the other 50 mothers living in households with an annual income more than $40,000 a year. This is to keep comparison amongst the groups. The measures we will be using is the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. It is the 10-item Likert scale, and we will also be using an annual income questionnaire to understand our participants' annual income and how that affects the rates of recovery they experience.
Our procedure. The study will be consistent of surveying a sample of 200 participants, all being new mothers who have given birth within the past 6 months. 100 of the mothers were not diagnosed with postpartum. The other 100 mothers were diagnosed with postpartum depression. 50 of the participants will be mothers of low socioeconomic status, and the other 50 will be of high socioeconomic status. Both experimental groups will take the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale test online every week. Each experimental group, low income versus high income households, will take the test over 8 weeks. The testing will reveal the recovery rates of the mothers with postpartum. The results of both experimental groups will be compared. The experiment studies the recovery rates of mothers in high-income households versus mothers in low-income families.
Data analysis. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale was developed to identify women who may have postpartum depression. Each answer is given a score of 0 to 3. The maximum score is 30. The EDPS uses the Likert scale. Mothers who score above 13 are likely to be suffering from postpartum depression. The scoring. Questions 1, 2, and 4 are scored 0 to 3, with top scores as 0 and bottom box scored as 3. Questions 3, 5 through 10 are reverse scores, with the top box scored as 3 and bottom scored as 0. The maximum score is 30, and the possible depression scored at 10 or greater. The way that we will continue to study this data is using the Pearson's R correlation to see how strong our findings hold, as well as using the standard deviation to see the difference amongst our participants. These are our references. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation.
Bye.